This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Boris Johnson, the man who led the Conservatives to victory in the 2019 election, the man who got Brexit done, and the man that was ultimately undone by his lockdown rule breaking. Following his rather disastrous fall from grace, Johnson may have assumed that his troubles were over, that he could return to the backbenches, stick around as an MP, and possibly even mount a comeback at some point in the future. Well, unfortunately for him, it's just not that simple. There's an ongoing Privileges Committee investigation into whether he lied to Parliament, and Johnson actually had to testify to the committee. So in this video, we're going to have a look at what's happened so far, what Johnson said, and what might happen next. So let's start by explaining what the Privileges Committee is. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with UK parliamentary politics, we have two main types of committee, a standing committee and a select committee. The Privileges Committee is of the latter kind, looking at, you guessed it, the topic of privileges. Now, you're probably thinking that that sounds quite vague, but in politics this has a specific meaning. Parliamentary privileges are certain rights that MPs are given by virtue of their position as representatives of the people. For example, they have the right to freedom of speech, further than that of ordinary citizens. Now, while parliamentarians have these rights, they're expected to be responsible in their use. One of the gravest offences when it comes to privileges is lying. MPs are expected to be honest and truthful, especially when addressing Parliament. Prime Ministers have been toppled before because one of their ministers were caught lying. And it's seen as a very serious offence. And this is what the Privileges Committee is looking into in regards to Boris Johnson. Even though he's not the Prime Minister anymore, he is still an MP, and as such, he can be held to account and punished for misleading the House. In the document setting out the investigation, the Privileges Committee have set out that they are specifically looking into statements that Johnson made in the House of Commons in 2021.
Is that all guidance was followed completely during number 10?
Repeat, Mr. Speaker, that I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what I have been repeatedly assured.
The committee claims these quotes appear to amount to misleading the House. Before the inquiry even happened on Tuesday morning, the former Prime Minister published his legal defence. In this, he actually starts by admitting that he did mislead the House of Commons, although he does qualify this by saying that he made the statements in good faith. He goes on to push back against the idea of recklessly misleading the House, something the committee accuses him of, claiming that there is no precedent of contempt by misleading Parliament being found based on the concept of recklessness. He also questioned why Dominic Cummings is being included as a credible witness, given that he wanted to do everything that he could to remove me from power. He adds that other than evidence from Cummings, there is no evidence at all that supports an allegation that I intentionally or recklessly misled the House. His central defence appears to be twofold, that it should have been obvious that the rules and guidance weren't being followed, and that he shouldn't have relied on trusted advisers. In the former case, he draws distinctions between the rules and guidance at the time, and argues that there was not a one-size-fits-all instruction manual. And in the latter case, he argues that it was right that he relied on advisers, and that it is unprecedented and absurd to suggest that he shouldn't have. The committee were not expected to take him at his word, though, and on Wednesday they were given the opportunity to grill him. And grill him they did. The first individual to ask Johnson about his conduct in number 10 was Sir Bernard Jenkins, a Tory MP. He asked questions about the photo of Johnson raising his glass at the 13th of November 2020 gathering.
But the photographs show a lack of social distancing of 2 metres, which was required by the workplace guidance at the time.
It was 1 metre we could get.
So do you accept that you were present at this gathering and that people were not socially distanced while you were there?
I don't accept that people were not making an effort to distance themselves socially from each other, and that happened the whole time in number 10.
We know it was a leaving event for a member of staff. The photographs we've just seen do not seem to show any actual work being done. Why did it not occur to you that it at least might have been in breach of the regulations, at least because it was not reasonably necessary for work purposes?
Did you say, did it occur to me that it might not be reasonably necessary for work purposes?
Yes.
No, it didn't occur to me for 1 second that it wasn't reasonably necessary for work purposes.
Leaving do for everyone else around the country was not acceptable under the guidelines, all the rules. So why was it acceptable and necessary for work purposes in number 10?
Thank you, Sir Bernard. Well, I want to repeat what I said at the beginning. I understand that people looking at that photograph will think that it looks like a social event. It was not a social event. If anybody thinks that I was partying during lockdown, they're completely wrong.
After Bernard Jenkins, Labour MP Yvonne Fothegue was given the opportunity to grill Johnson. She moved on and looked at Johnson's birthday party on the 19th of June 2020.
Why did you think this was reasonably necessary for work purposes, as was required by the rules at the time?
I thought it was reasonably necessary for work purposes because I was standing at my desk surrounded by officials who'd been asked to come and wish me a happy birthday. I'd only recently recovered from an illness, from COVID, and it seemed to me to be a perfectly proper thing to do.
Fothegue then moved on to talk about the 20th of May event that took place in the number 10 garden.
We have evidence that trestle tables were set up on which alcohol was laid out, and that the attendees included your wife, as well as advisors who were not from number 10 but from other government departments. Did you see that when you were at the gathering?
I remember going around and thanking staff for what they were doing during COVID. Now, it is perfectly possible that my wife was in the garden as well, but she was entitled to be there. And she certainly didn't receive a fixed penalty notice for that event, and nor did I.
Would you have advised anyone else in the country if they'd asked you at one of the press conferences at that time to have a large social gathering in the garden?
It was not a large social gathering. It was a gathering intended, and I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. People who say that that event was a purely social gathering are quite wrong. My purpose there was to thank staff, to motivate them in what had been a very difficult time and what was also a very difficult day in which the Cabinet Secretary had just resigned.
Now, it's understandable why Johnson might have been rattled in the committee, considering what could happen to him. So let's move on to the last part of this video and see what could come of all of this. Well, the Privileges Committee actually has quite a lot of power here. Once the investigation concludes, they have the power to recommend sanctions if they decide that Johnson did knowingly mislead the House. Worryingly for Johnson, one of the sanctions they could recommend is a suspension from the House of Commons. If the committee recommends, and MPs subsequently agree to, a suspension of more than 10 sitting days or 14 calendar days, then this would trigger a petition under the Recall of MPs Act of 2015. If this is signed by more than 10% of his constituents, then Johnson faces a by-election and could be unseated before the next general election. So this is very high stakes for the man who was once rumoured to be plotting a comeback in number 10. We don't yet know how this is going to resolve, but we do know that it will continue progressing, and fast. With the rise of complex geopolitical situations, semiconductor politics and AI tools, things are moving fast right now. AI isn't the future, it's here right now. And to be part of the next tech revolution, you need to understand the core concepts behind things like AI, neural networks, and machine learning. And the best place to learn them is Brilliant.org. Brilliant.org is the best way to learn maths and computer science interactively. Brilliant has thousands of lessons, from foundational and advanced maths to AI, data science, neural networks, and more, with new lessons added monthly. It's not just complex AI and computer science stuff. Anyone can improve their skills and make themselves more employable by running through courses on things like data analysis and statistics, so you can better understand what's happening in the rapidly changing world around you. And you can do all of that without all that much effort, by taking courses each and every day to keep yourself on top of everything. To try everything Brilliant has to offer, free for a full 30 days, click on the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription.